So, as Seth mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Rector. I guess I am one of the oldest clients here. Not oldest, probably. Longest. And Sue's presentation actually provided a great foundation for what I would like to discuss today. Our program at Cisco that we've developed called Integrated Intelligence. And so what I'd like to start with is just talking about why we want to look at integrated intelligence. And I'm just talking about the text analytics aspect today, not the entire big data, which is something we're exploring, but I'm just going to focus on the text analytics aspect. And talk about the beginning, where we started with Lexalytics and how we came to experiment with text analytics from an influencer intelligence perspective, and now how we're evolving that into more of a customer intelligence, and then this goal of a really integrated, holistic model. So integrated intelligence, why do we care about this? What are we doing with this? As in many large companies, people tend to go in silos. So you've got your PR, I want to look at media here, and you've got your customer intelligence, and they look at media. What we really want to do is look holistically across all of the places where stakeholders are speaking to us. And I'm in strategic marketing, and marketing is taking a much more active role in driving the business from an outside-in perspective. So really not, a shot in the dark, or we have engineers who think this is cool, which is great, but really from an outside-in perspective, what's important to our customers and our stakeholders, and develop strategy based on evidence rather than something we think is cool. Also, really how this started was around metrics and enabling some accountability. So what is the perception of our stakeholders and the media and analysts, and how can we get some insight into that, and driving some accountability for each of our teams, and again driving that strategic direction. And then we dug a little deeper to really develop, look at the trends and figure out how we can optimize our communications mix, so how we can leverage the industry analysts and the financial analysts and social media and the media and the customer voice, and really bringing that together. And then looking at, okay, we have these messages that we want people to understand, and in theory we build them based on care-abouts of our customers, but how are they resonating? What are people talking about relative to Cisco as well as our competitors? So understanding that, and then really creating messages around what is resonating, what people really are talking about. And then finally, what a new area is really this integrated voice of the customer. So where we started, actually, way back in 2005, we thought, hey, we're going to build our own platform. There were several platforms around. Social media was just getting started. There were a lot of just traditional media monitoring platforms, but we said, hey, we want to build our own. So that's when we partnered with Lexalytics, and we actually built our own internal platform. And we worked with all the vendors to bring in media, and then we said, hey, this could be really powerful. We want to look at support forums and analyst data, and as we started looking at all of the possibilities, and then global data, we said, whoa, I don't know if this is something we really want to continue supporting internally, because there are really smart vendors out there who really know how to bring all of this together. So in 2008, we started talking to vendors. And actually, at the time, social media was really the cool thing, and people were really focused on social media. So there were a lot of vendors who were like, yeah, we can do the social media. But we said, no, we want this whole integrated view. We want to bring in all of this data. And that's when we partnered with Symphony, which is now Visible Symphony. and Lexalytics, and really came together and said, hey, we have built this very powerful tool internally. We like what you've done with your Orchestra platform. We love the interface, and let's bring these two together to really leverage this power of this integrated data. So that's what we built. We launched it in late 2008. So we have been partnering with Symphony and Lexalytics since then, and it just continues to expand. So we bring in a full pipe of data for media, Twitter, for Cisco and some other brands. And then what we do for really looking at insights is we pare that down to our real top influencers. And that could be a whole other discussion, how we look at influencers. But basically we say, okay, who are our top 300 traditional media, global traditional media? And then we have segmented out by geography or by country as well. We are currently looking at 13 different countries, so several non-English language, which has its own challenges. So we segment top traditional media. Social media, we have a way that we look at social media holistically, which is, again, you guys know, the big junky pipe of data, which doesn't provide a lot of insight. So we look at that, and we have our filters around that big pipe of social media. But for our metrics and kind of deep analytics, we really look at kind of the most influential social media. And then we're actually bringing in financial analyst data. So financial analyst reports, the JP Morgans, what are they saying about Cisco and our peers? And industry analyst data, they're one of our main influencers. So we have an enterprise license with IDC and other key analyst firms. So that is so key to look at holistically in terms of our stakeholders. So we bring that data in, the research reports as well as any blogs, so we can look at that separately as well. And then our employees. We have 65,000 employees. I mean, they're a huge influencer. So when I say, I'll talk later about what we're bringing in terms of employee data, not any private email or anything like that, but we're now growing our internal data sources. So what we started with and what we continue to leverage in terms of metrics and then the deeper insights and analysis around it, and I'm simplifying this because I can talk for hours about all of the in-depth work we do around these metrics. But our two key metrics that are really our CMO has signed up for these are around sentiment and share of voice. And really we look at sentiment relative to peers, because if you look at us in a vacuum, what does that mean? And we look at trends over time. So each quarter, our CMO presents this to John Chambers, our CEO, with some analysis. And again, this is very simplistic. It's not just Cisco overall, it's Cisco in our key focus areas. How are we trending? Where's our sentiment? Where are some areas where we could have improvement? So we do this to really drive the strategy. If we see that our share of voice is declining, and then we get into more analytics and we understand, oh, wow, we're missing the mark here, then we can kind of tune it and see how we can affect the outcome moving forward. And we do this for our key focus areas. We do it each quarter for earnings. We have events and launches, and then the message analysis. And then the other way that we use this is really to optimize the communications mix. So again, when you have those silos of data, Sue mentioned this, and you have completely different taxonomies and different ways of looking at it, it's hard to understand how it all works together. So we can look at specific topics and see how they drive each other. And so this example, I'm not even going to let you know what the specific example is, but you can see, we can look at social media, traditional media, industry analysts, and financial analysts and say, okay, well, this particular thing happened. Boy, the social media were talking about it, and then the traditional media picked it up. But the analysts, they're generally actually more positive, so then we can say, oh, if we educate some of the analysts, then maybe we can leverage that with the traditional media. And so it just really helps us understand what's driving perception. From a messaging standpoint, we leverage this functionality that's called zero mindshare. So this takes advantage of the theme extraction. And what I've always said about Lexalytics in both sentiment and theme is that entity level sentiment, entity theme extraction is just so powerful. We see so many word clouds, nothing against word clouds, but, people put them up there. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that tell you? Oh, yeah, of course, cloud computing is the big word in the cloud computing word cloud. Okay. So what we do is we look at zero mindshare. So this example, data center is one of the big focus areas for Cisco. So we said, okay, what's being discussed around data center relative to our peers? So in this example, HP and IBM, this was about a year ago. And you have to dig a lot more into the data, but at least this gives you a first glance. And you can see at a glance that we were being left out of the cloud computing conversation. So what this shows is where Cisco is not included in conversation relative to HP, relative to IBM. And you can see, wow, we are really not being included in cloud. We better do something about that. So that, we shared this with our executives and said, we got to get our act together. We dug in to see what was resonating around cloud and our competitors, why the media and analysts were talking about them and not us, and really helped formulate a much more cohesive strategy that we could talk about. We had much more investment in the cloud. We hired a cloud CTO. I wouldn't say it's all because of this data, but certainly this really supported it. And when you show this to executives, it's very powerful. Look, we need to do something about this. We think we know what we're talking about, but nobody else does. So we really focused, and then this last year, we have made much more progress. So if you look at the data now, again, we look at trends in share of voice, trends in message penetration. You can see that we've really moved the needle. So employee data. So it's probably no secret that we went through a big transition last year. And the employee data was very key in helping our executives understand the sentiment of our employees. So we bring in to the Symphony platform, we have about 5,000 internal forums, discussion forums, where people are actually surprisingly frank. And we have email lists, public email lists. So again, no, we're not, even though we, in theory, own the data of anybody's computer, we don't go into anybody's private email or private IMs, but there are email lists that people have. One list called Clueless, for example, and you guys know the old-fashioned email lists where you're like, yeah, okay, and you know, it seems like you're just talking to a few people, but there are several thousand people on these lists, so it's a great source of data. We also bring in, we have company meetings where we get about 5,000 verbatims per meeting, and we ask a lot of open-ended questions about employees' perception of management, about the company. We have chats during those meetings, and we have videos that our executives put out, and people have comments. So basically what we're doing, and we continue to build upon this, is we harness any place that employees are providing feedback. So it's very powerful, and we're starting to combine that with some of the more quantitative data, but especially during the transition, and we continue to do this, but it was very visible all the way up to the board level during the transition and layoffs, and kind of a weekly pulse of employee sentiment. And we used the heat maps and theme extraction to understand, what were the key care-abouts and how we could develop messaging. And we really used that data to drive communications. And there's only so much you can do when the news isn't great, but to really try to pinpoint the biggest concerns and make sure people had all the correct information. So that's all. What I've presented before is all the influencer data, and I think we have a fairly well-oiled machine around that, and a great process that has been spread fairly widely within Cisco. And during the transition, I moved from communications to strategic marketing. And luckily, like I said, our CMO really values this data, so she said, hey, let's take all of that great influencer information and insight, and let's learn about our customer. Let's look at that all together. So what we're building now is this integrated voice of the customer. So we have a whole bunch of ways that our customers are talking to us. And again, we're kind of looking at it in silos. We've got the big pipe of social media. Oh, that's our customer. And we've got customer satisfaction reports. Okay, that's our customer. So what we're building now is this integrated view at the customer. So at the center, you can see we have advisory boards. So this is kind of the most intimate discussion with our customer, where we sit down and talk about specific subjects, and we actually get a transcript of that. So it's very robust, and we get very detailed feedback. But before, and it's not a huge volume, but before, a limited amount of people got to see it, and again, it was kind of a human read. Well, this is what they care about. This is what they care about. So we're starting to bring all of those transcripts into the platform. And then we have events. We have our user event. It's a little bit bigger than this. It's about 20,000 people, and we get 20,000 verbatims. Again, they're talking to us. And these are people like you guys who are really wanting to give feedback. So it's a great venue. And before, again, humans going, oh, okay, well, this is what they care about. So trying to kind of have a consistent way of soliciting their feedback and then understanding their feedback. So we're integrating some of the verbatims from the events. And then we have our customer satisfaction verbatims. We get 100,000 verbatims a year from our customers. And so we're just now bringing those in as well, and including surveys. So we have a specific CSAT survey, and then we are working to get some consistency around other surveys so that we're not asking the same customer questions a million times. We're getting some organization around that, and then we're analyzing that in the same way. And then this outer layer has been a little bit more of a challenge, and we're still working on it, but it's basically saying, how do we take that big pipe of data out there, social media and the traditional media, and how do we segment that out, especially for Cisco? We don't have anything consumer anymore, so we really, except for Linksys, want to filter out that B2B conversation. Well, that's really hard in the social realm. So we're still cracking that nut to really, really filter out what do our customers, and customer in the loose term, not necessarily a Cisco customer, but a potential customer, what are their care-abouts? Who's talking about routers and switches out there? It's a very filtered view, so that's something that we're still working on. So if you look at it together, this kind of demonstrates what we're building. So everything in blue is what we've been using for several years. So traditional media, everything I've discussed, including non-English language, industry analysts, financial analysts, employee data, and social media, like I said, the big pipe. And I have it crossing everything because we always say social media, that's the customer. And I'm like, no, that's not the customer. That's the employee. That's the analyst. That's a whole mishmash. So let's get smart about social media. And then customer data and partner data. We're just starting down the path of integrating our partner data as well. We have a much bigger focus on the partner, which is very similar to the customer data. So that's what we're building. It's in progress in terms of the full integration. And what we would like to do is keep building. We're going to get more customer data. We're just bringing it all together. More global data. And video to text is something people have talked about for a long time. We have, not just externally, but internally, everybody's doing video now. I've talked about the forums. We have thousands and thousands of videos that employees share. So we're talking internally about how can we leverage all that video, not to mention all of the external video to text capabilities. So what we really need is really good sentiment, obviously, but the short text, which you guys have talked about a lot, not just for the external Twitter and social media, but for a lot of these verbatims, great job, or this was good, but you need to, change that. So really pretty short Twitter-like comments. And then the global language. So that's just a challenge. We're huge in China, Japan. We're not doing it, I would say. We're doing the best we can right now. So, really augmenting our global presence and our global analytics is something that we really need to work on. So, any questions? Yeah.
You talked about some of the zero mindshare side of things, where you're looking at where your marketing is not being as effective, and some of the decisions you made there. Can you give us some more examples of what kinds of decisions you're making with these platforms, and what sorts of things that what sort of impact you're seeing down the line from having all of this in place?
Yeah, well, a lot around messaging. There are a lot of experiments that we're doing now, especially now that I'm in strategic marketing, around correlations and kind of predictive analytics. So that share of voice, not looking at that in a vacuum, and using that to basically shape our messaging, but doing some correlations around share of voice being a leading indicator for market share. So that's kind of in progress. And then we are working on an experiment at this stage, but looking at the kind of social media sentiment and some analytics around our communications relative to earnings and the correlation to the stock price, and what can we do to communicate most effectively to have a positive impact on our stock price. So I'm not ready to share any results yet on that, but that's some other ways that we're using it to drive decisions and to be a little bit more predictive.
Can you just talk a little bit more about the better sentiment on short text, maybe some of the things you found and what you're trying to extract out of that, if you're just using the themes or what on there?
Yeah, it's themes, and we usually do themes around positive. We look at themes overall because they a lot of times tend to be neutral, and then we look at positive and negative themes. Of course, everybody focuses on the negative. So employee, I would say employee, and then the customer feedback is probably the biggest area where we use that. And it's a lot of that kind of two meanings in a sentence and very short. This was good, but they could change that. Or so I'd say we probably have the most challenge from our employee comms people, and the customer data, we're still just starting to figure out how do we use this a little bit more effectively, because we're looking at that so many ways. But even getting down to product level, getting much more specific around a product, like, I like my account guy, but your product sucks. You know, they would never say that, but so yeah, those tend to be really short, and a lot of times two different opinions in one comment.
Can you tell us what you're doing for Chinese, Japanese, Korean messages if they're in text now?
I'm embarrassed. Sorry. Yeah, we're translating. We're doing automated translation into English, and which is really funny. And so then we try to optimize the translation, and then we have a human layer of validation on top of that, because there's just no way you can have automated sentiment, certainly not sentiment, on that type of translation. It works fairly well for just the overall count, the like share of voice, because that picks up Cisco, and we figured out the oracles, and we used to do Apple, which was really hard. So from like a recognition of product names and company names, I think we've done an excellent job. So in terms of sheer numbers, I think that's pretty solid, even because for our purposes, notwithstanding all of the message penetration, but in terms of the numbers, we're trying to get the essence of it, and I have to explain this to all of our constituents around the world, but it doesn't have to be perfectly human translated. I mean, you just don't need that. You can get the essence of it. Yeah, we were reading, we had Cloud Cities in China that we announced, and it was coming through as Cisco in the Divine Land. I was like, wow, we are really, we're going places. So anyway, so then we start incorporating some of that into the search terms, and it's just a combination of making search terms that match what's coming through, and then a human analysis. So really, really good on the kind of company recognition, and then sentiment you just can't do with translation into English, so that has a bit of a human layer on top of it.
Any others? Thank you.
Thank you.